Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my video on the 2020 National Jewish Book Awards. The National Jewish Book Awards have been around since 1950. It's, I think, the biggest, most prestigious North American prize for English language books of Jewish interest that are out there. Now in 2020, the prize spans over 18 categories in fiction and nonfiction and books for children to adults. And the judges for the prize, which I believe are a mix of scholars and writers, are listed on the webpage from the Jewish Book Council that I will link down below. So the 2020 prize was announced winners and finalists last week, and I thought I'd just quickly go through and highlight 8 books, 4 in fiction and 4 in nonfiction, that caught my attention. This is not a TBR video, alas. I have so many books already on my TBR. A couple of these I do think will be joining that list, and I'll go into that in some detail later in the video. But for now, here are the books, and I'll link to their Goodreads pages down below for more information. I'll start with fiction. The first book that caught my attention is The Lost Shtetl by Max Gross. This was actually on our contenders for the BookTube Prize long list back in January, when Robert emailed me and the other judges to create the long list of books that we are now reading for the octafinals. This book did not make the list, and to be frank, I did not vote for it because it's a sort of magical realism story about the Holocaust. It imagines a Polish village that somehow escaped the notice of the Nazis, and I believe just in modern day sort of poked its head out again. And just for me, I don't really like this sort of fiction. I'm pretty selective when it comes to the Holocaust in fiction, and I know this sort of thing has been done before, the sort of magical realism approach to trying to understand what happened, but I don't know exactly what would be served here. I mean, obviously, a good story is a good story, and a lot of people liked it, including the people on this award committee, but it's just not a genre that I'm very interested in. On the opposite side of things, this is a book I did vote for and did make the BookTube Prize long list. This is A Puragun by Colin McCann. It is a book about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I believe told through the perspective of 2 fathers who lost their daughters to violence, one being an Israeli man and one being a Palestinian man. Colin McCann is not Jewish or Muslim or Arab or Israeli or anything like that, but I know that this conflict has been of interest to him before, and a few years ago he even wrote a story that made the Best American Short Stories collection, and I thought it was pretty moving. So I'm pretty hopeful in terms of what he can bring to the table here, and that he can speak with compassion to these issues, even if he's not a member per se of the surrounding communities. If anything, I guess I'm a little wary about the idea of how the women will be portrayed, female characters in this, especially since we're starting with the premise of men reacting to the deaths of their daughters. So, like, it's the fridged trope of women who die to propel the male narrative. But, you know, it is what it is, and unfortunately, losing children to violence in this conflict is not out of the ordinary, and I am just hopeful that something moving and compelling will come out of this. Next, we have Florence Adler Swims Forever by Rachel Beanland. This is a Jewish-American, I think, immigration story, but I think it takes place in the 1930s, and it's mostly about a family that's already assimilated. Not sure if that means they will be portrayed differently than other Jewish American families from the 1930s, but at least something that caught my attention is that word assimilation. And this book also made Steve Donahue's best of fiction list, so that's exciting too. I'll link that down below. And finally, to round out fiction, we have The Orchard by David Hopen, which obviously I already own, and I've held up in some recent videos as well. This is a book about an Orthodox school and a young man who attends it. He grew up, I believe, in a more ultra-Orthodox community in Crown Heights, but then his family had to move and to Florida, I believe, and he is now privy to a very different set of students with a perhaps more secular education, but they're still grounded very much in the religion and the community, perhaps just with slightly different focus, as it were. This is basically a campus novel, a Bildungsroman about growing up. It's been compared to Donna Tartt's The Secret History, and has gotten, I guess, some acclaim even beyond Jewish circles, with some non-Jewish readers also being interested in it. So that's what caught my attention and why I had to own a copy for myself. And with that in mind, I would really like to read it soon, and I'm thinking that I might be holding this up for the Maybe Midrash readathon in May, which asks us to read books in fiction and nonfiction pertaining to religion, so here's a fiction pick. Okay, and going on from here, I have 4 picks in nonfiction that caught my attention, starting with Morality by Jonathan Sacks. Jonathan Sacks, or Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, in fact, was a major head of the UK Jewish, I guess, religious community. And also, you know, a member of the House of Lords. So a well-known figurehead who tragically died last year, so this will be his final work to, I guess, put out his ideas about, well, morality. I know that he'll probably be delving a bit into Jewish texts, but I feel like the focus might be a little more broad and about his thoughts on the modern world. And since he was so prominent in terms of religious leaders of the community, it just naturally caught my attention, and I would be interested in what he might have to say. Next, I have a biography from Left to Right, Lucy S. Dawidowitz, and the New York Intellectuals and the Politics of Jewish History by Nancy Sinkoff. Dawidowitz was a historian and public figure of mid-20th century. She was kind of a voice of Jewry for Eastern Europe, and grew up around the time of the Holocaust in Poland. She started out her life as a communist and ended it as a neoconservative, you know, in a slowly rightward moving shift, as is implied by the title of this biography. It feels like, in a way, she's a figurehead for something that a lot of Jews of her generation took part in, where they started out on sort of the far left and moved to the far right, and speaks, I would assume, to the changing realities of 20th century America, when our ideas about politics and social issues were in flux. It's an awkward topic for me. I, like a lot of American Jews, continues to find herself on the more progressive side of the aisle. That being said, I think politics today are a lot different than they were in mid-20th century, and in fact, I think our political movements today are also in a bit of flux about who we are and what we believe and where we stand. So it would be nice to get that perspective of what people were going through and the changes it wrought in our affiliations, you know, back, I guess, 70-ish years ago now. Well, it'll be a bit of a span more than that, but yeah, I just thought this might be an intriguing window into that topic. Then we have Esther by Erica Brown, which is biblical scholarship on the character of Esther, who appears in the Bible and in Judaism is a focal point of the holiday of Purim. Also, Erica Brown is a religious scholar who is local to my area and has some roots here in terms of her education in the DC area. So a lot of those things combined. I especially love, scholarship into the women of the Bible from a Jewish perspective. And so it caught my attention, caught my fancy. But I think the one that I will be focusing on for a nonfiction, maybe Midrash choice, is going to be Time and Difference in Rabbinic Judaism by Sarit Katan Gribbets. Perhaps the most hyper-specific on this list in terms of nerdiness. I don't know, maybe I'm getting myself into something a little too dry, but the topic intrigues me. I think it's going to focus a bit on the rabbis of the Roman Empire who were fashioning religious rules having to do with delineation of time as a way to, keep themselves separate from the other nations and to keep the community and our rituals and sense of self intact. It continues to trickle into the future and how Jewish religious communities define the rituals that we have to take part in, which can sometimes be differentiated by gender and age and that sort of thing. I just think it's kind of a fascinating way to look into the idea of culture in a way that's not your usual way of looking into culture. But it is a way that's so important, really, how you parse out the day and how you deal with, the space-time continuum, as it were. In a more philosophical way, I suppose, than scientific. But anyway, I guess I'm going into this relatively ignorant of the subject, but I really hope this will give me some grounding and be a compulsive read. So that about covers it for me now. Again, you can find the Goodreads pages for all of these books linked down below, as well as more information about the National Jewish Book Awards and all of the winners and finalists for this year, all the way back to 1950. I will be back on this channel tomorrow to do a Friday Reads, definitely on Saturday. So, in the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone. And I'll see you next time.